Good morning, my name is Billy Beck. I'm the Extension Forestry Specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm also with the Department of Natural Resource Ecology and Management at Iowa State University. Really excited to be here today. This is one of my favorite edge of field practices, like Tom mentioned before. You've got the nitrate removal capability, but you've also got all the other compound benefits that these perennial vegetation practices provide to not only water quality, but the landowner, wildlife, as we're going to see as we go on here today. This is a really good spot to talk about kind of the benefits of diversity in riparian plantings. This tree that I'm standing right next to here is silver maple, Acer saccharinum. It's one of my favorite trees. It doesn't get a lot of love or a lot of hype or a lot of press, but it's a very common riparian tree in Iowa. Beautiful gray bark, bright red conspicuous buds in the winter, and as you flip the leaf over, it's got a brilliant silver color, which it gets its name from. So if you notice, this buffer is almost entirely silver maple. And not only is it entirely silver maple, it's silver maple of the same age and about the same height and the same size. So it's really lacking in compositional diversity and structural diversity. And there's nothing wrong with that, because a lot of species like cottonwood, silver maple, early colonizers typically grow in these kind of monocultural stands. And they're doing wonders for water quality, they're doing wonders for wildlife, and they're doing wonders for value to the landowner. But if we do mix it up and incorporate different species into these zones, you're going to really see the benefits to all three kind of go up. You're going to see much more structural diversity if you plant different species in here. That's good for songbirds and other wildlife to utilize those multitude of new habitats. Also, for the landowner, the more species you have in here that get incorporated, the more potential you have for sustainable income over the long term. Lastly, and this is the one thing I always stress, is diversity leads to resilience. So the more diverse stands we have out here, the more resiliency we're going to see against any kind of climatic shifts in the future or emerging forest health and pest threats that may come about. So a lot of great species can grow in these riparian or streamside zones. And again, like Tom's going to mention and we've mentioned earlier, the soils here in these riparian areas can be very heterogeneous, very diverse. So working with a professional forester is going to be really key to getting the right species for the right sites to meet your objectives for water, wildlife, and sustainable lawn farming. With these smaller streams, they're incredibly reliant on the adjacent riparian area for annual inputs of energy, like carbon and organic matter, but also substrate in the form of woody material delivered by these trees for aquatic habitat and just heterogeneity and diversity within the channel. So this is one thing that is often overlooked, is when you look about, okay, what's the value of woody riparian vegetation? One of the things that is, again, often overlooked is that they do provide great value in stream to aquatic biota, fish, invertebrates, for the simple fact of providing this. It's just woody substrate delivery into the channel every year. If you ever buy one of these places, snag a handful of this stuff, it's alive with life and trapped organic matter and little invertebrates and minnows and everything. So this is a really critical benefit that establishing woody perennial vegetation along streams provides. Another really neat thing that it does is when materials such as this and even entire trees, when they fall into the channel, they provide or they lead to a very diverse channel bed and channel shape. They have very different velocity patterns, eddies, and all kinds of other things that develop scour pools and just, again, add to the diverse habitats available for in-stream biota. Another great contribution of woody material and trees to the channel and the water itself is the fact that it's a very sunny day, but we're under this great shade right now, and you can see a lot of the channel is actually under heavy shade. And what that does is it regulates any kind of temperature swing we could see from night to day, and that links to dissolved oxygen as well, and it makes a much more buffered situation as far as dissolved oxygen and temperature for the aquatic invertebrates, aquatic biota, and whatnot too. So stream shade, another great benefit of riparian woody vegetation. And again, it's all about your objectives. This is one of the great things that trees provide. I'm standing in one of my absolutely favorite parts of the landscape, and that's the streamside or riparian area. Riparian area is just a fancy name for along a stream or river. It comes from the Latin riparius, so feel free to use that to impress your dinner guests over the holidays. But I just want to stress how important, and Tom mentioned this before, how critical these areas of the landscape are in terms of water quality. And I think that importance even gets more significant in the intensively managed watersheds in the agricultural Midwest here. These strips of perennial vegetation are literally buffer the water and the water quality in our streams and rivers from the management practices and the results of those management practices we have in the uplands. It's absolutely critical for these zones to be properly functioning to have a positive effect on our water quality and quantity. And when I say properly functioning, I'm really talking at the base is that they're established with native perennial vegetation. That is absolutely critical. Trees or native grass or some kind of perennial, as we'll get to later, is absolutely critical. And there's research here in Bear Creek, right from Bear Creek, that says you don't need to plant a mile of this vegetation to do a lot of good. A little bit goes a long way. But I really want to stress too, the wider you get, the greater those effects of this perennial vegetation are going to be on water quality, and also the more impact, the more benefits you're going to see. You're going to add benefits as you get wider, not only to water quality, but wildlife, and to you as a landowner through sustainable sources of income and any other kind of objectives you might have for the landscape. All right, we're about a half mile downstream from the original silver maple buffer, and you can really see a difference as far as diversity here. And whenever I'm in the woods, I look for two things right off the bat. That's compositional diversity, or what species assemblage is out there, and also structural diversity. Structural diversity is kind of how the components of the forest are laid out both vertically and horizontally. So right here we've got way more compositional diversity. We've got a variety of lilacs, viburnums. The shrub component is here. We've got silver maple again, but we also have black walnut, river birch, swamp white oak. So again, a myriad of really great species that provide multiple benefits for wildlife, the landowner. And just looking around here, you can see there's more structural diversity than we had in that silver maple kind of monoculture back there. Again, both great for water quality, but these just have so much more compound benefits when you add the diversity in here. So from top to bottom, you know, you've got this kind of woody component in the mid-story here, what was absent with the silver maple. You've got this shrub edge, great for birds and other wildlife here on this component. So again, this is a great example of, you know, what adding diversity can do to these riparian plantings. All right, so when you've got all these trees and shrubs of different heights and shapes and densities, that really adds a lot of niche habitat to the landscape. So much more wildlife species, and especially songbirds and migratory birds and whatnot, breeding birds, can utilize these different areas. The top of the trees, the mid-story, the understory, and then the buffer edge. We've added much more complexity to this planting, so you're going to attract much more greater diversity of wildlife. And again, if you're looking for sustainable income as we go down the road, you've got potential from nuts, timber, hunting, you know, just even general aesthetics for a nice place to spend with your family. So this is, again, a really nice example of added diversity and the benefits you see to wildlife, landowner, and water quality.